Well, that happens. Well, speaking of darker things.
Much darker.
Yes,
yeah.
wine number 3. Cool story. Tom said this was one of his favorite wines, right?
I know.
From 2013.
From 2013. I would catch Tom siphoning out of these couple of barrels actually.
Just to drink?
Yeah, just like.
Oh, that's awesome.
And they were pretty high up, so it wasn't just to drink. It was like he actively climbed 3 racks and was hanging out with the top barrel to hang out with this wine. So
that's true love, right?
it is.
Awesome.
Well, there's always every vintage. It's funny, people ask you what your favorite wines are, and every vintage there's a wine that you're like, I've made something different and interesting that speaks to you, like us individually. And so for this vintage, we were lucky. We had 2 wines that really spoke to our hearts, but for me, it was the Chenin Blanc, which is sort of part of this same Loire thing that we've been sort of doing too. And for Tom, it was this Cab Franc. Tom's in love with this wine.
Yes, we are having a relationship.
You are.
As she drinks her rinse, when did you fall in love with this wine? Like when you saw the vineyard, or when the fruit shows up?
The vineyard is owned by Herb and Melanie Quaddy.
And that's in the Applegate Valley.
In the Applegate Valley,
So
which
Quaddy
is
North.
which is the next valley to the west of the Rogue Valley. So a little wetter, a little cooler, and a little bit higher elevation spot. And so when we went down to visit the vineyard, it was just kind of love at first sight on the vineyard, and then talking to Herb and how he farms it.
Love at first Herb also.
Yeah, all
Herb's
organic
pretty
farming.
wonderful.
And this guy did. We practice 100% in our Willamette Valley sites, dry farmed vineyards, and have been working to get that way with our 2 Southern Oregon sites too.
Okay.
And so Herb was like, "Hey, we're ready to we're okay with putting soil moisture meters here and seeing if we can, get this, weaned into a dry farm situation."
Wow.
And
Southern
he was
Oregon
just-
is pretty huge.
Yeah.
and he would send me everything on my, on an iPhone app, and it was just
That's
it was just
wow.
this one of these great relationships where you knew that we were going to be able to do something kind of cool.
Well, we
with
should
it.
talk about our Cab Franc and how that started the first year. We worked with Cab Franc actually from Washington the first year. It was a gift in exchange. We're friends with Jesse Skiles of Philly East, and so he needs
rad
to
guy.
press his Roussan. What was it?
Well, no, we traded some press loads.
Yeah, no, he needs to press his Roussan, right?
Yeah.
There we go.
Mhm.
Yeah, there
And
we
so
go.
he was like, "Oh, I have this extra Cab Franc from a vineyard in Washington." And Tom was like, "Sure." And then it arrived, and he looked at me. He's like, "So I guess we're making Cab Franc." And I was like, "Today?"
Yes.
Yes, today. Okay. So our first year, so 2 vintages ago, 3 now. We made the Cab Franc, and we made a blend that we called our Beton blend, which is the Cab Franc Gamay and Pinot Noir blend.
Yeah.
And then we didn't know if it would take. It was sort of a Chevrolet style blend, Terrain Rouge that we hadn't seen sort of applied in the U.S., and so it was sort of a gamble, and that was actually the wine we were in love with that year.
And we'll remind our distributor, Michael Wheeler, that he said he wasn't sure if he could sell it.
That's really nice of you. So we made that the first year, and then we loved making it, and we loved what had happened. So we actively wanted to make that an Oregon wine for the next vintage.
Cool.
So we started working with Herb and sourced the Cab Franc for the Cab Franc portion of that, but also decided that we just make some straight Cab Franc.
And we weren't really 100% sure how this would go, but Herb was obviously speaking all the right things to us, and the site looked great. But until you worked with the fruit, you don't. That's the missing kind of component to it. And
I don't think there was anything to worry about.
Yes, in hindsight there was nothing to worry about. But no, but it was. He had planted these Loire clones of Cabernet Franc and things that we were just kind of really interested in. And so it just made all this sense. And so the wine, the fermentation turned out just amazing. And we were like, we're not just going to put this all into the Beton again. We should really see how some of this goes on its own.
So you saved, 2 barrels?
2 barrels, yeah. So we saved 2 barrels of it. And by about midwinter, like January, February, kind of already tell that they were going to be my favorite barrels.
And I love this. Like you know, you're in Oregon or in a growing region. When you talk about this, you say tubers. I'm like, oh, that's a pretty good amount.
Yeah,
Two whole barrels.
Two whole barrels, exactly. So it's a traditional ferment, and then it's aged in just neutral oak. Just beautiful bright acidity, and then what I love, it has like so much black smoky tea, like
So much.
lapsang. No, it's lapsang souchong on this one, not bergamot at all.
Sorry.
You're wrong.
Those are tea.
Yes, I do. It's
I
all
love
I
that
drink.
stuff. I love that smoked tea. I love that
smoked
smoked
tea. So it's got that like
Awesome.
peaty quality, and I think it's actually because the Applegate is constantly on fire. Like that
Sure,
region
that's
is just
probably-
constantly
it
on
is.
fire. So.
Yeah, and I get like some really like gamey like venison or something like that going on here. Like maybe even
It's got this
dried out a little bit.
Like
Yeah.
dry blood. It's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah.
incredible.
Pepper
Yeah, because that
steak.
sounds disgusting, but it's delicious.
Well, I mean, but that's what I love about like wines. Some of the wines we've had from Chinon or Saumur, and in parts of the Loire Valley, and they just have these kind of gamey, kind of tea-like.
And there's a little bit. There's always a minerality to them, but it's
Yeah.
like a high iron sort of content to it that's fun.
And so it was just not something typical that we would see of wines. You know, we tried some Cabernet Francs from Washington and from California. They're fairly rich and opulent wines, and many of them
Yeah.
were great, but just not what I was thinking
Makes
of
me
in
want
my
to taste like
mind.
California.
Well,
Yeah.
but there was also this green pepper element, which is not like, which I think is always a part of
Yeah,
Cab
well,
Franc,
absolutely.
but can
Right.
get
There's a
so
little in here.
but can get so dominant sometimes, you know.
Absolutely.
And I feel that once that it dominates, then you sort of lose the other nuance. And this is a powerful wine in terms of flavor. You know,
Big berry.
it's got, but at the same time, what I love about it is its weight in mouth is still super elegant. Like it's not like it's
There's
a
good acid,
yeah, and
yeah.
it doesn't end heavy in any way, which makes which makes it in line with the wines that we make. You know, like nothing ends heavy. So
And it's easy to it's kind of easy to keep drinking it. Like I'll admit, I've loved a couple of those like heavy purple Cab Francs in the past, and then some of them are definitely
They've all
too
got
much,
their
but-
place.
Yeah, but yeah, like this still has a really good depth of flavor, but the acidity is still really enjoyable.
I like those wines too, and I guess that every wine has its moment, and I definitely appreciate those wines. But I was just, and I know Kate and I we were like, hey, why are none of the Cab Francs that we were drinking when we were living there that we buy from these places, why do none of them taste anything remotely of this character? Not that they should taste mimicked or the same, because that's.
but the nuance, I think
Yeah,
that we were
it's exactly-
searching for nuance.
Yeah,
In that
it's
style.
a style.
In
yeah.
the style, yeah, I was
And-
searching for just a little bit, something ephemeral, something that was like a little bit, like I don't know, out there somewhere, not just so in your face.
Exactly.
And it's fun that you've got so much experience with the French side of this. We have very little. Like we've had some,
Totally.
but a question I'd like to put to both of you, like this is blind in a lineup of 20 wines. Like, why is this not from the Loire? When you taste it, what jumps out at you? It's like, oh, this is Oregon, or this is the Northwest, or
No, that's a really interesting question. I think that all of our wines are really rooted in our style of winemaking, but they have this unique Merkin bent.
There is. Of the
They
wines
do,
that
they
we
just do.
have, though, this would be probably the hardest one for me to call out.
all right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know the wine and I know it would be ours,
Yeah.
but if I didn't know the wine and I was just tasting a lineup of Cabernet Francs, because I've drinking so many Cab Francs that are from the New World that just are not this style at all, I would just assume because of the
Oh,
style
interesting.
that
Sure.
it was a Loire wine.
I think I
Not
personally.
enough examples.
Sure.
I personally feel
Right,
that the difference for me between the wines that we've made and drank in France and the wines we make here is there's an intensity of fruit in them, and it's not necessarily that they're fruit forward or that they're bombs in any way. There's something about American wines that have an intensity that's that's just very different from how European wines are balanced. It
Very
just
cool.
is.
Agree
So,
with that.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's just, yeah. And,
Yeah.
and that, I think it's beautiful. I think it's what we do.
It's exactly. I agree 100%. And the other thing is that as the wine world and the community of people in the industry has gotten kind of smaller in a sense, so we've all seen each other more. We've all talked to each other more. We've all done some of the same things together. There are, I would say, less just like blaring differences amongst certain people than there maybe once was. Like, yes, you can pretty much always call out the difference between a Bordeaux and a Napa Cabernet. It's but there are times when I drink, Oregon Pinot Noir, I'm not 100% sure it's from Oregon. And there are times that I drink red Burgundy Pinot Noir, and I'm not 100% sure it's from Burgundy. Yeah. Because there's manipulative ways you can deal with wine, and there's ripening techniques that start to negate some of the terroir-specific parts of it. And once you kind of get into those realms, it's sometimes a little bit more fuzzy about where the wine is coming from.
It's really interesting to watch our worlds get smaller, actually. It's like we
Thanks,
talk about...
Internet.
We talk about it in terms of...
It's all your guys' fault.
We talk about it in terms of everything we do in this world, but our wine worlds are getting smaller. It is. We have access to each other, and it's really cool.
And we don't have enough time to talk about this too much. We've been talking a lot about wine. But I really do want to say you guys have done a lot of great work to make the Oregon wine community smaller, too. With the Southeast Wine Collective here, they provided kind of an incubator for a lot of small people to start their wineries, for people who are a little more established to have a stable place to grow and get their wines out, and a nice place in the city where you can taste a lot of this stuff. So you've done a lot of good for a lot of people by running this place. So
thanks.
We'll talk about that in more detail, I think, in a future episode. But I wanted to make sure you guys get credit.
Yeah, that would be cool to get some of our peers out here one day and just kind of like...
It's a great band of bandits.
Yeah, there was 20 varietals made at the winery this year.
Nice.
Oh, that's
21.
awesome.
I hate to put you on the spot, but this is the last we'll do about it. But can you name all the producers that are here right now?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning.
We're gonna have to count it off.
We have to count it
Yeah,
off.
do it.
So we have, us, Division Winemaking Company, Helioterra, Vincent Winemaking Company, Fullerton Wines, Orr Winery, Wolfel Wines, Jasper Cisco, James Ron, two more.
5Q.
5Q. And one more. You can do this. Jackalope Wine Cellars.
There we go.
Done.
And like to talk about like how we talk about this as an incubator and like how there's so much Oregon wine and like we just do this as a hobby. There were like 2 or 3 of those that I hadn't heard of before tonight. I mean, there's so much going on.
It keeps this hobby fun.
Yeah,
There's
it really
so many
does.
new wines out
Well,
there.
the whole idea of this spot, it was to find a place for people who really were committed to their craft to try to take a stab and really get
Everyone
a
deserves,
launching pad.
Yeah, everyone
That's
deserves,
awesome.
people that are interested and are talented really deserve a place to be able to make their wines.
Awesome.
So let's drink some Pinot.
Awesome.
More Pinot.
More Pinot.
Yeah, rinses.
And we'll step back in time a little bit again too.
A little bit in time, but this is always a vintage release behind. So this one is always held.
Did you guys know?
Yeah, or no,
Did
I
you watch
haven't.
me chug my Cab Franc earlier? That was
That Cab Franc is wild, by the way. Like, that's one
Oh,
that
thank
feels
you.
like it was aged in concrete or something. The minerality in it is
That's
pretty
right.
wild. So,
So this is our Pinot Noir Deux. So we make our Pinot Noir 1 every year, which is a blend of multiple different vineyards.
that's the one we did on the show first.
You did the first time. And you were very sweet, thank you. I remember watching it, and Tom and I were like, they
We
said
had no
something.
idea about your show. They're like, hey, these cool guys are talking about our wine. I was
We
like,
watched it, I was like, this is wonderful. But so means 1, so it's our first blend of the vintage.
Okay.
And then we make our Pinot Noir 2, which is a select sense of place within that vintage. So where the Pinot Noir 1 is more of an overview of how the year tasted for us, then with our 2 or our 3, we really try to focus in on a specific spot.
I don't think it could be said any more perfectly than you did.
Thank you. I've been doing
I
this
will
for a
give
couple
you
of years.
So which spot did you focus on?
So this is Yellow Springs again.
Same
Okay.
vineyard that we
Oh,
have
cool.
the Chardonnay, and this is from the original block of Pinot Noir that was planted in 1973,
Wow.
and the vineyard. And we were really fortunate to work with that vineyard for in 2012, and this spot is just it's got a specialness to it, and so when we ferment it, it always has a lot more density, a lot more kind of layers to it, a lot more tannin, just a lot more going on. And so we always just kind of pull aside a few of the barrels, and by the time we start putting together the cuvee for the Pinot Noir, we're like, do we want to keep a couple of these? And every year we've kept a couple aside, and it's been the
Which we rack out of barrels. There's a little bit of a higher quantity of new oak. It just works out with the structure of these vines and what they produce, and so we pull those aside. We rack out of the oak, which is removing them from the newer barrels and then moving them back into older barrels, and then they get aged for about an extra 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, between neutral barrel and then we put the barrels together in a small
Stainless tank,
stainless.
exactly.
All right.
And then we bottle, and then we sit on it for
Almost a year.
yeah, about a year afterwards. So we just released this. So this is our 2012.
Oh, really? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
All right.
So
We
just
released it with the 2013 Pinot Noir on.
which was in September this year.
Actually, October 1st was the official release date.
Oops.
Wow. Okay.
Bottled it.
But between two people,
Sorry,
all of the facts come out. That's
we
yeah.
bottled on September 11th. That's correct.
All right.
Okay. Yes. So yeah, we decide to hold on to this for a little bit longer, and it has so much structure. It's still a baby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Darker character to the fruit too.
Oh my
stepping
goodness.
away from the 13.
I mean, thinking that
darker, a little bigger shoulders.
the difference
Exactly.
between the style of winemaking and the vintage and the
Yeah.
spot of this wine and this wine is just, I mean, it's night and day.
Absolutely.
It's kind of cool though. I mean, you're talking about the same region.
The
Yeah.
French folks like to say there's vin de soif and vin de drink, vin de garde, and so wines to drink or wines of thirst, I guess, and then wines to keep. And the Carbonic Pinot Noir is definitely our drinking wine, and
Yeah,
this
absolutely.
is we make tiny amounts of this. There's like 60 cases or so, right?
Yeah.
And this is the smaller percentage overall of all the wine we make, but the ones that we want to really see what happens with the test of time, the ones we really think that we can see like evolution and that are going to really benefit by patience.
This is the biggest wine Tom and I have ever made.
And it smells like it. I haven't even tasted it yet, but as I'm describing, I'm thinking like blackberries, and it really reminds me of like a lightly seasoned steak.
Yeah.
Savory going
Which
on.
is normally somebody would be like, "That's horrible to say that about a Pinot Noir, Dan." And I'm like, "No, it's not like
But we
heavy.
also
It's not like
we try to respect the vintage. So 2012 was a warm year,
Absolutely.
with like a beautiful summer and no interruption in that weather. And so when Tom and I make wine, we really try to respect our sense of place. But also, we're not going to make wines that are out of balance with what the year gave us. And while this is the biggest wine you and I have ever made, I still think
13.3%.
13, yeah, I mean, but huge for us. I remember looking at Tom and being like, "Oh my
It's
god!"
really actually quite low for 12.
I was like, "But it's above 13 for us. That's unheard of. Like, help!"
But I mean, we try not to pay much attention to actually the wines we end up making just tend to be lower alcohol just because of the way we pick and the way we think about it in the vines.
But this is what the year gave us.
But that's what the year gave us, and so that's where it was at. But
That's
it's interesting that some places or some people, well, they'll just pick the wine early because they don't want the alcohol to be high. But then you're really missing out on the complexity of flavors that can develop. So it's really about picking your spots and matching them to the making the right decisions so much as it is
and not being
what the
scared.
alcohol is.
And not being scared of the fact that it's a warmer year, monitoring your acidities, but also that's our job. Our job is to amplify the beauty of every vintage. It's not to create something different out of it or to create something consistent out of it. It's really just to make it as beautiful as it can appear. And so with 2012, it was the ripest year we'd ever worked with, and I say for Tom and I that it was one of the hardest years for us to think about. That it was an easy year in terms of no rot issues and all those things.
Yeah.
It was for us the first time that we dealt with so much heat, and really a learning year for us. So
Awesome.
yeah.
I mean, a lot of people said the fruit came in really clean.
It was so
the
pretty.
wines were very easy to make.
They were easy to make, but at the same time, how do you find balance within those?
Right.
And so try to maintain acidities. And,
There's also something of the struggle of winemaking. You get something out of that. There's when the year is 2012, Yeah, this was our first year actually, the Southeast Wine Collective.
It was an easy
and
year.
It was perfect
Oh my
not
God.
to, on your first year of a new facility, not to have to get stressed with
It's like literally like fruit
oh
just
my God,
rolled in.
everything's going.
Could you imagine if 13 had been your first
Oh my
year
god!
here?
Yeah,
would
but
be
I think we would have quit.
The Southeast Wine Collective might not be here, and neither would all.
It's we would just be gone by then. I mean, it was hard, and but hard for a different reason. But what we've also learned is that Oregon has this complexity, and that it has its cool years, it has its warm years, and it has ways of throwing curveballs at you.
Well, that's why we're here.
But it makes it
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah.
So
it takes a while to
interesting.
appreciate that.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't appreciate that when I first started getting into wine. Where's my big fruit? 6, 8, yeah, 7. I really had a problem with it.
I love 7.
But as I've learned and experienced more and tasted all these wines, especially as they age, you fall in love with all these weird years, like the stuff,
I think people say something really interesting. I get this question oftentimes in the bar, because we have the wine bar here. It's like, oh, I heard it was a bad year.
Right.
And I really caution people against the word bad. A difficult year.
A difficult year, yeah.
It's the word difficult.
That is something the press easily throws
But
at
it's called
things,
winemaking. It's not like it's supposed to be easy. It's
Right.
actually my job. It's your job. It's a job.
Well, she's exactly right. I mean, by New World standards, we're pretty much hands-off winemakers, but we still are making the wine. This isn't, the grapes falling on the ground and creating themselves and finding their way to a bottle. And I mean, there's definitely, an intervention that takes place amongst people to create a product that hopefully is enjoyable and drinkable. And, years like 2012, while maybe you're not going to have as much complications with fermentation or just some of those parts of it.
Sure.
Those are the years where you're like, well, what am I going to do to really
find
make
the
sure
nuance.
the nuance and the character is really
Yeah.
pulled out this year?
Well, that it not be one note, or that not be like a little bit too heavy, or just uneven. You need to still find that balance. That's the beauty in it, I think. And I think that's beauty in life. It's just finding balance all the time. So,
Right.
There we go. My quote for the day.
I think the blackberry fruit in here really is delicious on the palate too. Still plenty of acidity, a little bit of earthy character, a little bit of that steak comes through, I think, but good sense of complexity and it lingers too. Kind of as it fades away, I get some nice dark fruit that sticks around.
And it's only been open for 3.5 days. I just realized.
That is shocking to me.
Yeah,
That's holding up really
I saw
well.
12.8 on this.
But it's a big year, and I'd
This is
say
the last bottle that we have here at the wine bar, and we wanted to show it. And
Well, thank
Tom
you.
was
That's
like,
great.
Yeah,
Tom
thank
was
you very
like, we
much
should
for
do the
sharing it.
Deux, and then he was like, this is
We
all
don't
we
have
have
any
left of the Deux here at the
So
wine
it just
at the bar.
is sold out?
Sold
Yeah,
out.
this
Yeah.
it was 2012 is a very popular vintage, and the wine has thankfully been well received, and it went considerably quicker than we thought it would.
Wow, awesome.
So I guess that's
good for you guys.
Yeah, that's a tip if you've got it too. Like, definitely decant that, let it get some air. If you pop
We
the bottle.
decant the crap out of that one.
Still structurally very firm, yeah.
Yeah, no,
Not
and-
a lot of acid, still great tannins.
But we also make wines that we think can hold for a few days. I think that's really important to our winemaking
yeah,
style.
absolutely.
For me, it's like I do finish bottles all the time, but when I don't, I want them to hold, and so it's really important that our wines really hold. So.
That's good. So you two obviously are both very knowledgeable about what's going on. I'd like you to talk a little bit about what you think the other one's strengths are. Like when it comes to winemaking, like in the cellar, where do you go to the other one for
Can I
advice?
start with this?
You
Sure.
start, yeah.
All right. So Kate has a palate like nobody else I've ever been around, and it's a huge strength to our kind of combination here. I've always felt like I have kind of a very good holistic understanding of what's going on, and keeping it straight in my head on all the different pieces. But sometimes when it's drilling down to like the very details of what each barrel tastes like and what each component tastes like, and how they can put those together, this one is absolutely perfect at that. And it is impossible for me to make decisions. I would never be able to do it by myself, because I would just be like, I like that one and I like that one, but I don't know how they're going to go together. She knows how to do that in a way that is amazing.
Awesome.
For you, I think for the strictness I have to our wines and the standard I hold us to, that you are the most positive winemaker I've ever met in my life. Tom is the person that will make, sunshine out of the shittiest day. And so, I mean, it's true. You are the constant cheerleader for what we do. And I think between the two of us, that team is just invaluable. So.
And I think to be in a positive state of mind when you haven't slept for 3 weeks and are filthy and
exactly.
Yeah.
You need that. You need the Labrador that rolls in.
Well, I mean, and I mean, as a guy that, and Chaz too, like we do pretty intellectually intensive work pretty regularly, and when you're exhausted and if you're getting grumpy, you start doing dumb things. Like it really happens if you're overly critical. So. I mean,
I think that balance between the two is really important.
There's a thing with winemaking, especially on those really challenging years, and like 2013 was a challenging year with the state of the grapes that we were all harvesting, and there's a lot of winemakers who I think see all the different things that are going on, and they're like, oh my God, how am I going to get through this?
How are you going to fix it?
How are we going to fix this? And then
Fix is
that
the wrong
becomes
word.
a very overwhelming feeling sometimes. And
I
think that the best thing that Kate and I have been able to do together is, we've been able to kind of keep moving and keep thinking and not let, like, when one is kind of down in a moment or the other is worn out, we've been able to kind of pull each other back up. And in those years, it really pays off, because those are the years where you're like, things can easily go awry.
Awesome. One more question, because I've heard this before and I love it. I'd love to share it with our audience. How did you guys meet?
I stole wine from her. Literally.
Yeah, he stole wine from me.
I stole wine from her.
At a party.
I thought it was a boat ride. It was a boat
At
ride.
a party. Yep.
It was a booze cruise for a birthday party on the San Francisco Bay.
And I am the only person that brought wine and looked around and
I couldn't
determined
drink
that it
any
was.
more natural light.
I determined it was the wrong party for the bottle of wine.
What'd you bring?
I brought a beautiful Napa Cab, and
I remember it was a Bordeaux bottle. I don't know.
I did, and I went below deck, and Tom had opened it and was sitting there drinking. I had hidden it.
There's a debate about whether this bottle was open or not. I do know I drank it.
I opened it. And then we got married. So, literally.
It was meant to be.
It was.
But we did fall in love with Oregon wine together, and when we got married in Sonoma County in Healdsburg, on a Sonoma vineyard, we had nothing but Oregon wine.
Oregon Chardonnay and Oregon Pinot Noir.
What'd you have?
We had Domaine du Rhin, so Arthur. We had Lorraine.
Yeah.
And then we had standard Pinot Noir.
Good.
You drinking awful good.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
nice. That's nice.
It was wonderful. I don't
We
know.
were wine club members, and we called them up, and they were like, "Yeah, we'll sell it to you." Basically, what would be like considered FO, or like the lowest rate price in the
Yeah, sure. I mean,
Like,
you're
they would
buying
sell to
quantity
the
at that point anyway,
distributors.
right?
Getting that
And
shipped
we were like,
to a Sonoma vineyard was pretty
at
friggin'
that price,
hilarious.
it's pretty
I'm
decent.
sorry. Do you mind accepting these cases of wine?
Oh my
I
goodness.
really want this stuff.
Yeah. Well, you made it happen. That's good that you good stuff. I can't stop. What French word? What French word do Americans in the Willamette Valley mispronounce more than anything else? Like what really grinds your gears?
What is it?
Bourgogne.
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 Bourgogne. There we go.
It's Bourgogne, right?
It's
Bourgogne.
Yeah.
And what do people say?
Bourgogne.
Wow. Okay.
I apparently haven't been listening. So, yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to be enough for now. I think a lot of chatter, but it's been a lot of fun.
No, this
Cheers, you
turned
guys.
out
Oh, no, your
absolutely-
glasses are
Yeah,
good.
we're good.
turned out
Thanks
absolutely
for
great. Thank you
coming
so
to do
much.
this with us.
Thank you so much.
Dude,
For
the
singing
last-
us
Hey,
all.
Hey, we all need a last splash here.
So,
for sure.
yeah, you gotta say.
Everybody pick something.
Yeah, everyone picks something. Oh, we see what everybody wants.
Me and Dan can go
All
on
right.
the same.
The last question that you all get, of course, comes from them. So, what question would you like to ask them?
So Tom and I are notorious music lovers. So
Awesome.
it is top 5 guitarists of all time.
Or that'd be perfect. Top
Yeah.
5.
Nice, thorough answer. Get into it. Think about it.
Do it.
This is a killer interview.
Dead or
This is-
alive.
You feel great about this? Yes, that's great.
Dead or alive.
That's great.
So, cheers, you guys.
Yeah,
Cheers.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Cheers for coming on
Cheers.
the show with
Cheers.
us. So, all right, guys, we'll see you next time.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Done
watching.
with you.
How long is it?
Oh.